The 2023-2024 season was one of the craziest, weirdest, and most entertaining seasons we've ever seen. But now that it is behind us, it's time to revisit this crazy season and all the moments that defined it. With every NHL season, the craziness starts in the offseason. And prior to the start of the 2023 season, we would see a young phenom be deemed the next generational superstar and Connor Bedard go first overall to the Chicago Blackhawks. The hype was off the charts for the kid, and people have their doubts of whether or not he's too small for the NHL, but if you've seen him shoot a puck, you're not overly worried. That being said, the NHL is a different beast, and we would have to anxiously await his debut to see if that would be a problem. Meanwhile, former Leafs GM Kyle Dubas joined the Penguins and made a huge splash, trading for Norris Trophy winner Erik Karlsson. The Penguins are looking to give Crosby one last shot at a cup by becoming a retirement home and building the oldest team in the league. Speaking of the Leafs, they just made Austin Matthews the highest paid player in the league per season. Mike Babcock is also back in the mix and coaching for the Columbus Blue Jackets after he swore that he was a completely new coach, and he's gone. Fired before the season even started, before he coached a single game for the Blue Jackets. Turns out he was trying to get to know the players a little too much, and all of a sudden, we're off to a roaring start to the season. Now, October, of course, is when we kick it off with Sidney Crosby versus Connor Bedard. It's the old school versus the new school. Bedard gets his first NHL point, but ultimately, Sid the middle-aged man shows him how it's done, and the Penguins beat the Blackhawks in this season opener. Now, a week into the season, Austin Matthews has 6 goals through his first 2 games, recording back-to-back hat tricks.
Matthews for 2 deep, Matthews scores! It's back-to-back hat tricks for 34!
Meanwhile, the face of the NHL and Connor McDavid isn't exactly having the best start. The Oilers aren't looking too hot, but, they have McDavid, so they should be fine. Now, speaking of generational talents, Cale Makar became the fastest defenseman in NHL history to hit 250 points. And as October came to a close, the scriptwriters started to cook. The NHL had their first ever Frozen Frenzy, where all 32 teams played on the same day. Now, if you watched the NHL, regional restrictions made sure you couldn't watch all their games. So let's thank Gary Bettman for that one. But then we had Jaden Schwartz with a beer league back check special by throwing his stick to deny a goal. No penalty on the play, but let's check in on the Canadians, who absolutely still suck. But that doesn't stop David Savard from becoming a human meat shield for Jake Allen and blocking all these shots. It was a rough start for Canadian teams in general, as Sens forward Shane Pinto gave his best Pete Rose impression and was suspended for 42 games for sports betting. And to finish off October, Vegas, Boston, and Colorado were all on top of the NHL, while Calgary, Edmonton, and San Jose keep the basement nice and cozy as we head into November. Now, only in Canadian markets do fans start to panic this soon. And after getting booed off the ice and bullied by the Boston Bruins, the Leafs Cup Parade was canceled for the first time this season. Shame. The defending Cup champs in the Vegas Golden Knights look like the same wagon that dominated the league last season by starting off 10-0-1 after spanking the Colorado Avalanche 7-0. So naturally, the Anaheim Ducks had to be the first team to beat them in regulation because this season makes no sense. Now, one team that's shocking everyone so far is the Vancouver Canucks. After bringing in coach Rick Tocchet to replace the entire debacle that was the Bruce Boudreau saga, the Canucks look surprisingly great with Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko leading the charge as their superstars. However, we can't say the same about Calgary and Jonathan Huberdeau. After coming over for Florida in exchange for Matthew Tkachuk, Huberdeau struggled big time in Calgary's system, while Tkachuk thrived to become an integral piece to Florida's magical cup run. Unfortunately, the Huberdeau era continues to get worse after he got benched in a comeback win against Nashville. That right there is the look of a defeated man. But hey, at least he's not on the Sharks, who, by the way, are off to a legendary start, going 0-10-1 and only scoring 10 goals in those 11 games. However, don't let these guys fool you. They got all the makings to be the 2024 Cup champs written all over them by playing possum early in the season, and the Oilers learned that the hard way. Edmonton is just as much of a mess right now as San Jose. McDavid looks hurt, they can't defend for shit, and they placed their $5 million goaltender in Jack Campbell on waivers. After a loss to those same Sharks that had them competing for the basement of the NHL, the Oilers fired coach Jay Woodcroft and brought in some guy named Chris Knobloch. Doesn't even matter anyways because they're 5-11-1 to start the season, and it looks like another wasted year of McDavid and Draisaitl's prime. Oh well. Looking in the weeds, though, is our boy Artemi Panarin and the Rangers. With a 16-4-1 record at the end of November, the Rangers look damn good, with Artemi Panarin making an early case for him to be the league MVP.
Panarin on the line with Zibanejad and Kreider. Shot try, they score!
The Rangers look so good that they can seemingly get away with anything at this point, even something as nuts as Trouba whacking Frederick in the head with his stick. Let's check in with Gary, and yes, a $5,000 fine should do the trick. Now this is when the whole league started to go upside down. We got our first ever Gen Z line brawl this season between the Canucks and the Sharks. A couple punches thrown, but for the most part, it's just a whole lot of grabbing onto a guy, hugging, and making sure you look like you're not doing nothing. Now the league wants to also fine Marc-Andre Fleury for wearing his native mask to honor his wife, and then out of nowhere, we got the worm Corey Perry getting his contract terminated by the Blackhawks. Meanwhile, Connor Bedard is on pace for 50 goals as an 18-year-old rookie. To add on to all this, Ovechkin, on the other hand, is playing like a guy that may barely crack 20 goals as Father Time looks to be catching up. November also saw the NHL head over to Sweden, and over there, William Nylander put on a show in front of his hometown crowd to make sure A, the Cup parade was reinstated, and B, to make sure that he gets the bag on his next contract. I mean, surely Toronto won't pay 4 forwards more than $10 million, right? Moving on to the final month of 2023 in December, it started off with the battle of the Tkachuk brothers, which saw the entire game rack up a total of 167 penalty minutes.
And then every player on the ice has a 10-minute misconduct. Florida will have a 2-minute power play.
Despite Brady Tkachuk trying to will his team into somewhat being respectable, the Senators are still the biggest disappointment in Canada. The Panthers steamrolled them 4-0 and are starting to look like the team that went to the Cup final last season. Now let's check in on the old age home, and wow, look at this Tristan Geriatric scoring a goalie goal against the Lightning.
The extra attacker comes on. Here's Jarry with an empty net, scores! Tristan Jarry with an empty net goal!
That is just incredible. But it's also the most depth scoring help that Crosby has gotten all season as the Penguins continue to struggle despite Sid the middle-aged man being an absolute beast. It also doesn't help that their power play hasn't scored in 37 straight attempts despite having 3 future Hall of Famers on the same ice. Speaking of Hall of Famers, Patrick Kane has decided that he's a Red Wing after having hip resurfacing surgery. Everyone thinks he's washed, especially the analytics community, but being reunited with DeBrincat was enticing enough for both parties to give it a shot. Despite bringing in Showtime, December wasn't too kind to the Wings. Captain Dylan Larkin got knocked unconscious in a game against the Senators, and to add insult to injury, they would lose the game big in the process. Meanwhile, there's a concerning trend going on in the NHL, and that is hitting from behind.
They wave it off. Oh, man! Collision, and down in a heap goes Luke Hughes, and that will certainly get a response from the Devils.
John Tortorella doesn't think the average modern hockey player knows how to properly take a hit along the wall or effectively take contact, and the way that some players carelessly go into bad spots suggests that he may be onto something. There are still some players who are built like a nail gun though, and Chris Tanev is one of them by blocking shots with his face.
I don't even know if I want to watch this. I mean, he's going to block it. Oh my gosh.
Before we continue with the rest of the recap, I want to thank HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's the off season. I must have all the time in the world to get creative and cook all these fancy meals, channel my inner Gordon Ramsay, and just go to town. But you'd be wrong, because I decided to get a puppy. That means that dinner has gone a lot more stressful with this pup running around causing havoc. I started using HelloFresh at the beginning of this year, and it's made the dinner time process 10 times faster for me during the season. HelloFresh makes it easy to create restaurant quality meals at home without the high prices of eating out. What I love most about it is that it comes with over 100 meal combinations to choose from each and every week. And personally, I grew up in an Italian household, so it's nice to have a change up from crushing pasta every other night. Their new 15-minute meals gets dinner on the table quicker than delivery, and their easy to follow recipes include pre-portioned ingredients delivered fresh so that there's no last-minute grocery store run required. All you have to do is just choose your delivery day, open your box, and get cooking. Right now you can get up to 20 free meals with free shipping at hellofresh.ca using the code HockeyPsych20. That offer is across 6 boxes for new subscribers only. That's 20 free meals at hellofresh.ca with code HockeyPsych20. Now, for all the East Coast viewers out there, they were missing the subtle domination of the LA Kings in the West. They started the year by making NHL history with 11 straight road wins, and all signs pointed to them being the top dogs in the West. Quinton Byfield was starting to look like a budding star, and all their advanced stats and defensive metrics looked really strong. The only minor concern is their new costly acquisition in Pierre-Luc Dubois not quite living up to expectations, but he's got 8 years to get comfy there and make sure he settles in. Another team making NHL history is the Arizona Coyotes. They had 5 straight wins against the last 5 Cup champs, and my goodness, they are surprisingly in the last wildcard spot in the West and are fighting off the Oilers. Well, turns out that random guy who was named coach of the Oilers in Chris Knobloch has Edmonton playing some really good hockey. The Oilers have won 6 in a row, and Connor McDavid has an absurd 21 points in his last 8 games. Speaking of surprises, the Flyers are somehow 3rd in the Metro behind Carolina despite being in a rebuilding season. The key to the success, according to their coach John Tortorella, is the size of their nuts.
Occasions they just stick with it and they're able to
we
make
win the game because we got balls.
Yeah.
We do.
Meanwhile, in the Metro, the fall off of Ovi needs to be studied as he's only got 5 goals in his first 24 games. That's enough to make a grown Capitals fan want to cry, but how about a player crying in a post-game interview? St. Louis had drifted into mediocrity since winning a cup in 2019. And once they officially decided to end the Berube era in St. Louis, fans responded by booing Blues star Jordan Kyrou, who was reported to have some communication issues with the former coach. That prompted him to give a passionate post-game interview.
I mean, it's just tough, right? Like, I love playing here, so it's tough to hear the fans booing me there. Sorry.
Don't worry though, this story has a happy ending as Kyrou would score on a breakaway the next game and receive a standing ovation from Blues fans. The waterworks wouldn't stop there though because Connor Bedard had Blackhawks fans crying with joy. And as if that wasn't enough to impress everyone, Bedard would get the entire league talking with this goal.
Rebound for Bedard down low. Bedard! Lacrosse style scores! Unbelievable!
Out west, there's also another dog on a tear, and that is the dog in Nathan MacKinnon, as he's got a ridiculous 19-game point streak that has him in the running with only one other man for pure domination over the league, and that is Nikita Kucherov. Heading into 2024, the Rangers, Canucks, and Golden Knights all sit on top of the NHL, while the Ducks, Hawks, and Sharks begin to gear up for the race to tank for Macklin Celebrini. Hopefully, 2024 starts off with a bang.
Slick hands, and Mary makes a move right there. No, it looks like Brendan Smith just steps up and catches him, yes.
We're not even a goddamn week into the new year, and Connor Bedard does the ultimate team sacrifice by skating directly into the shoulder of Brendan Smith to accelerate the Hawks' rebuild and tank for Celebrini. Truly a selfless play that has him on the IR for at least the next 8 weeks. Meanwhile, the beef around the league has started to go to another level.
Well, he's got to be out of the game for sure, man.
It's premeditated.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for me.
Things were starting to heat up, and so was Connor McDavid, who became the 5th fastest player in NHL history to 900 points. Everything the guy does is at breakneck speed, so when the NHL decided to take 10 minutes to review a goal for offside in a Hawks and Oilers game, McDavid let us know that he was not too happy.
It sucks. It really sucks. If it takes you 15 minutes to determine if it's offside or not, it probably doesn't really matter.
Remember when the Oilers stunk and they fired their coach? They went all of January without losing a single game, riding a 15-game win streak. That was enough to bring Corey Perry back from being canceled, and ultimately that sealed the Oilers' fate of making it to the finals and losing. Damn shame. Streaking seemed to be the trend in January as well, as the Seattle Kraken rode a Joey Daccord legacy run to a 9-game win streak.
A terrific goalie in his own right.
Oh!
There's Eichel. Oh, and he's robbed.
On cue. On cue.
Wow.
Going the other way is the LA Kings. Remember when they were looking like a wagon? Well, they're on a brutal 8-game losing streak that had Drew Doughty speaking the truth.
I think we got guys in this room who are too worried about themselves and worried about their points and worried about stuff like that. We get a 3-1 lead tonight, and guys start thinking it's a cookie night, and we stop playing the way we know how to play, have an awful second period, and then aren't much better in the third. It's about the team. It's not about yourself.
That tough stretch was enough to have them fire their coach Todd McClellan to get things back on the rails. That's quite a different vibe than in Colorado, where fans are literally tossing their bra at Nathan MacKinnon after recording a hat trick. Let's head back east, where NHL fans were introduced to Philadelphia's Cutter Gauthier after a shocking trade that saw them ship the 2023 first-round pick to Anaheim in exchange for Jamie Drysdale. After it was leaked that Cutter Gauthier had no interest in being a Flyer and made it clear towards management, the kid made himself public enemy number 1 in Philly for the rest of his life.
I don't know Cutter from a hole in a wall, and I'm not too interested in talking about him. I'd rather talk about Jamie.
Now, of course, as February rolls around, the NHL thought they would give us something to compete with the Super Bowl, and that is the NHL All-Star Game. We brought back the fantasy draft. This year, we had the last 4 players all draw their team at the same time so no one gets their feelings hurt or actively campaigns for winning a brand new car.
I need a car so bad, but I need it.
Nikita Kucherov gave us an all-time who gives a shit moment by putting in an effort that would make Pierre-Luc Dubois proud. A few celebrities came out to try and get the fans to care more than Kucherov did, but overall, it just confirmed to us that McDavid is the most talented player on the planet by winning the skills competition and pocketing an extra $1 million. But after the All-Star break is when things really start to heat up, as it's usually when the Fugazi teams start to fall off a cliff, while the real contenders dial it in and refine their game. With the Oilers looking like a completely different team since firing their coach, and with 16 wins in a row coming into Vegas, they had the chance to tie NHL history with a win. But Vegas lives to be the undisputed villain of the NHL and hands them their first loss of 2024. Meanwhile, Martin Popisil got to live every hockey fan's dream by cross-checking Brad Marchand in the face. Too bad you just can't do that. Get out of the game, good sir. He was ejected and put on Gary's naughty list. And speaking of dirty plays, Zadorov gets 2 games for this headshot on Lucas Raymond.
It's almost the head collided with the head, isn't it?
Yeah, at the tail end of that for Zadorov.
And after a game filled with bad blood and intensity, Jake Wallman scores the OT penalty shot winner in dramatic fashion and then hits the gritty. That is insult to injury, but the ultimate insult, according to the Toronto Maple Leafs, is Ridley Gregg teeing one home like Chara on the empty net to seal the game.
The finishing touches on an Ottawa win, a series win, and Morgan Riley takes exception to that.
Morgan Riley cross-checks him in the jaw in retaliation, and the entire hockey world debates on whether or not that was warranted. The NHL, however, says that we can't allow that and suspends Riley for 5 games. Jack Hughes and the New Jersey Devils are having an abysmal year filled with injuries and goaltending problems, but that didn't stop Hughes from calling out his goalie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Dawsey played really well, so when you get the saves, much easier to win. So great game out of him.
Also, Hughes had quite the week, letting everyone know that people pay to watch him play. Guys simply aren't afraid to speak their mind, be creative, and make mistakes in today's NHL, and John Tortorella let everyone know just how much the league has changed.
It's a dumb league.
As February came to a close, Austin Matthews becomes the quickest player to hit 50 goals in a season.
Matthews shoots, scores! Number 50 for Austin Matthews in his backyard.
Meanwhile, some kid named Matt Rempe has been called up by the Rangers and is making a name for himself by being a 6'7" monster on skates who is fighting everyone. At the beginning of March, the Panthers are still one of the best and most ruthless teams in the NHL who are looking to cause something every single night. Meanwhile, their rivals have a Nikita Kucherov who is absolutely tearing up the league by becoming the first player to hit 100 points this season. The offense in the league is rolling, with McDavid and McKinnon being right there as well, but the scriptwriters really decided to cook when Patrick Kane made his return to Chicago.
Patrick Kane in Chicago!
Oh my God!
Kane with the overtime winner! The Red Wings win it 3-2! The story is complete!
Had to know that was going to happen, but the good news for Chicago is that Elise Bedard is back from his broken jaw to join the pursuit of the basement of the NHL. Speaking of that pursuit, remember when the Arizona Coyotes were holding down that playoff spot? Well, they've lost 14 straight and are rumored to be moving to Salt Lake City. I mean, whatever. As long as they don't give them a dumb name, I'm sure it'll all work out. Let's take a peek over at Nashville, who has been on the outside looking in all year long, but all of a sudden, they've won 8 games in a row. The best part is that after they got spanked 9-2 by the Dallas Stars, management told them that they weren't allowed to go see U2 at the Vegas Sphere. Turns out they responded quite nicely. Now, with the trade deadline looming and teams looking to acquire that one piece that puts them over the edge, a few teams made some massive deals. The Hurricanes traded for Pittsburgh's Jake Gensel, pretty much signifying that Pittsburgh has given up on the season with him being on an expiring deal, and the fact that the Penguins are 8 points out of a playoff spot. The Avs picked up Casey Middlestat from Buffalo, and the Stars, who've looked damn good all season, picked up one of the best defensive D-men in the league in Chris Tanev. But all eyes were on the Vegas Golden Knights, who, back on February 20th, put Captain Mark Stone on injured reserve for a ruptured spleen. That gave them enough cap space to pick up Noah Hanifin, Anthony Mantha, and Thomas Hertl. Vegas did something very similar last season and won a cup, and they've doubled down for the official return of the Vegas injured reserves. It takes balls to be the most hated team in the league, but not as much balls as the Minnesota Wild's head coach, John Hines. He pulled the goalie in OT, and if you get scored on with the goalie pulled, you do not get the extra point. You actually get 0. And considering that Minnesota desperately needed to pick up 2 points, the gamble would actually work.
Zuccarello from the circle. Boldy scores! Oh my. What a move by John Hines!
With a little over 3 weeks remaining in the season, things would start to get off the rails a bit. Over in Philly, John Tortorella is starting to lose it. First, the Flyers go down 3-0. Hathaway is tossed from the game for a major, and Torts is furious. The ref has had enough, so he kicks out Tortorella of the game, but he refuses to leave and gives us his best Jordan Belfort impression.
I'm not fucking leaving!
After a strong stance, he finally decided to leave, but things are getting weird over in Philly as Tortorella would healthy scratch their captain, Sean Couturier, for a handful of games. While this is happening, that Rempe kid that I was talking about is really starting to make a name for himself in any way possible. A couple of controversial hits, some big fights, and a lot of bad blood. Rempemania is officially born in New York, and the city loves him. In the final weeks of March, the best are truly starting to separate themselves. McKinnon has a 35-game home point streak, while Matthews hits 60 goals for the second time in his career to officially reinstate the Leaf Cup parade. Then you also have Kucherov and McDavid threatening to join only Gretzky, Lemieux, and Orr in recording 100 assists in a single season. But as we get down to the wire in April, the wildcard race for the playoffs is getting out of hand. The West seems to have more clarity as it looks like the Vegas injured reserves are going to secure that last spot, and shocker, Mark Stone has returned to practice in a non-contact jersey. However, the East is a total free-for-all between the Flyers, Red Wings, Capitals, Penguins, and the Islanders. With the Flyers spiraling down that stretch, that has left the gates wide open for any of these teams to sneak into that spot. Now, despite the New York Islanders being the NHL's most boring team, they've been hot down the stretch, going 8-1-1 to secure the third spot in the Metro. That leaves the second and last wildcard spot up for grabs between 4 teams. Even though Father Time has caught up with Ovechkin, the Russian machine is getting hot at the right time. The Penguins, on the other hand, were completely out of the picture at the trade deadline. But Sidney Crosby has found the fountain of youth and has willed this team into a position where they could potentially sneak in after a win against the Preds. That sets up one night where 2 matchups would determine the final wildcard spot in the East. The Montreal Canadiens versus the Detroit Red Wings, and the Philadelphia Flyers versus the Washington Capitals. If the Red Wings or the Capitals got at least 1 point in their games, the Flyers would be eliminated from playoff contention. That meant that the Flyers could not go to overtime against the Capitals. They had to win in regulation to stay alive in the playoff race. Those two were tied at 1 with about 3 minutes remaining in the third period. Meanwhile, at the same time over in Montreal, the Red Wings needed a win to stay alive in the playoff race in general. An icing call led to an offensive zone faceoff with 7 seconds left in the game, in which Detroit was trailing 4-3. But needing a miracle, some magic happened.
Dylan Larkin on the draw against Evans. Scrambled faceoff, comes back, quick shot.
David Perron! It's a tie game!
That David Perron goal forced OT, and that extra point eliminated the Flyers, but they didn't know. So over in their game, they pulled the goalie in a tied 1-1 game with 3 minutes left. Seconds later, TJ Oshie would bury the most important empty netter of the season by simultaneously eliminating the Red Wings, Penguins, and Flyers to clinch the last wildcard spot. The Capitals somehow make the playoffs despite having a minus 37 goal differential and becoming the definition of an anomaly. Now, after all that chaos, that was just the regular season. And with every playoff matchup set, the real season begins now with the Capitals and Rangers. If any team could possibly do something that makes no sense, it's the Caps. But they didn't even stand a chance in this series. The Rangers' special teams dominated and held Ovi pointless in 4 straight games to complete the easy sweep and move on to the second round. They would await the winner of the Hurricanes and Islanders, which seemed a lot closer early on. The Islanders dominated Game 1 but lost, and in Game 2, they had a 3-0 lead, only to blow it in the third. After that, the Canes chased Sorokin out of the net in Game 3, and despite a ballsy win in Game 4 for the Islanders, the Hurricanes would close out the series in 6 to meet the Rangers in the second round. Moving on to the Battle of the Sunshine State between Florida and Tampa, the Panthers looked determined to prove that last year was not a fluke run, while the Lightning are trying to squeeze one more cup with this core and their captain Steven Stamkos on an expiring deal. With the Panthers having a 1-0 series lead, Sergei Bobrovsky would make the save of the playoffs in Game 2.
Bobrovsky dives to his right with a robbery!
Florida would also win Game 3 to take a commanding 3-0 series lead, and Stamkos was doing everything he could to try and will his team back with a pair of goals in Game 4 to force a Game 5. But ultimately, the Panthers were in a class of their own and would win Game 5 to move on. Stamkos looks on as to what could be his last game as a Lightning, but, I mean, let's be honest. He's their longtime captain. I'm sure they will figure everything out. Meanwhile, Florida awaits the winner of Boston versus Toronto. Now, as soon as this matchup was set, every Leaf fan canceled the Cup parade on their own. They didn't know how it was going to happen, but they knew for sure that the Leafs were going to find a way to lose to Boston. And in typical Leafs fashion, this series was a roller coaster. You had Nylander missing games due to migraines, Matthews getting mysteriously sick, refs are tackling Marchand, and Swayman looks unstoppable. With the Bruins having a 3-1 series lead, then entered Joseph Woll. He was a brick wall in Games 5 and 6, and with the Leafs literally seconds away from forcing a Game 7 with a shutout, they let in a goal with under a second despite Woll diving to stop the puck. And in that dive, he seemingly hurt himself for Game 7 on a play that didn't even matter.
He tries to get across to get it, and yeah, there's 0.1 second. Wow.
So that meant we had Game 7 between the Leafs and Bruins at TD Garden. It didn't matter that Austin Matthews is back. It's a lock that the Leafs lose this game, and David Pastrnak would do the honors.
Sends it in, and it's Pastrnak scores! Series winner!
Death, taxes, and Leafs losing in Game 7 in Boston. The parade is officially canceled, and the Bruins go on to meet the Panthers in round 2. Over in the West, the Avs and Jets kicked us off for round 1. We just saw an outstanding goaltending performance in Game 1, with the Jets winning 7-6. That's what we call a low-scoring game in the 80s, but then the Avs just decided to take over. They brought a pace of play that the Jets simply couldn't match, and despite having the Vezina Trophy winning Connor Hellebuyck, the Avs scored 5 goals or more in all 5 games to eliminate the Jets. Goaltending was also a hot topic in the Vancouver and Nashville series, where the Canucks would run into injury issues and be down to their third-string goalie in a guy named Arthur Silovs. With Nashville looking to even the series up at 2, Colton Sissons does his best Patrick Stefan impression with the empty net.
Right there, Colton Sissons with an empty net. Sissons off the post!
That sparks a Canucks comeback from a 2-goal deficit in the final seconds, and then they win it in OT to put the Preds on the brink. The U2 Predators found a way to force 6, but a Puis-Suter goal in the final 2 minutes of Game 6 pushes the Canucks over the edge in round 2. Now, for the 3rd year in a row, the Oilers have the chance to make the Kings look really silly. And in Game 1, a 5-assist performance from Connor McDavid set the tone for this series. The Kings would win Game 2 off of an OT winner from Anze Kopitar, but the Oilers have full ownership over LA as they win 3 straight to take the series in 5. Now lastly, we have the Vegas injured reserves versus the Dallas Stars. And what do you know, Mark Stone has miraculously been cleared for Game 1 and scores the first goal of the series in a 4-3 Vegas win. This series, though, was a Stanley Cup final hidden in the first round. Both teams trading wins back and forth to go all the way to 7 games, but it would be the Dallas Stars with the final dagger to end Vegas' season.
Smith back out for Foxa. Backhand shot. Score!
The injured reserves have been eliminated, and hockey fans everywhere feel justice. Now into the second round, where the Bruins and the Panthers are set to have a rematch of last season that saw the Bruins perform one of the biggest chokes in NHL history. The team split games 1 and 2, but in Game 3, Florida's Sam Bennett would get into a collision with Brad Marchand that had many people thinking it was accidentally on purpose. With Florida taking Game 3 and Sam Bennett becoming the most hated man in Boston with a game winner on a controversial play that could have been goaltender interference, the Boston Bruins were officially on the ropes. Despite a solid road win in Game 5 to avoid elimination, the Panthers' aggressive forecheck and relentless pressure was too much to handle, and Florida took the series in 6 to move on to the Eastern Conference Final. They'd be awaiting the winner of Carolina versus New York, a team that has typically dominated 5-on-5 against a team that has dominated on special teams. In the first 3 games, Carolina has held the edge in regards to play and ozone possession, but the Rangers' counterattack, power play, and goaltending was phenomenal to take a 3-0 series lead. Not to mention, Jacob Trouba literally tried to kill a man. However, there is something great to planting the seed of doubt in your opponent, and Carolina were able to take games 4 and 5 to do just that. It was starting to look like the Rangers may actually choke a 3-0 series lead as the Hurricanes held a 3-1 lead going into the 3rd period of Game 6. But the PETA guy from Sausage Party would score a natural hat trick to give the Rangers a 4-3 lead. New York holds on, and they have the pleasure of meeting the Panthers in round 3. Let's get back to the West, where Dallas has to face the NHL's top MVP candidate in Nathan MacKinnon. This season should teach us that no lead is safe, because with Dallas up 3-0 in Game 1, Colorado found a way to come all the way back and win it in OT. Dallas almost did the exact same thing in Game 2 but held on, and then a big 2-goal game from rookie Wyatt Johnson would give Dallas a 3-1 series lead. It was then announced that key forward Valeri Nichushkin would be suspended 6 months for violating the player's assistance program. That is a major hole that the Avs just don't have the depth to recover from, and Dallas took the series in 6 to meet the winner of the all-Canadian matchup between the Canucks and the Oilers. This series almost caused a civil war in Canada, and it started with the collapse from the Oilers by blowing a 4-1 lead to the Canucks in Game 1. Now, it wouldn't be the NHL playoffs without controversy, and after McDavid's high stick caught Hughes to draw blood, the no call had fans furious.
It's not the fall through. It is a high stick. The follow through as I watched it was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins nowhere close.
McDavid would rub it in by scoring a nice breakaway goal, and then Edmonton would grab Game 2 in overtime. Things only started to escalate as Draisaitl called out Vancouver's goaltending, saying it ain't all that good, and Artur Silovs responded by making 42 saves in a victory, while seeing Carson Soucy give McDavid a cross-check right in the jibs at the end of the game. That left Soucy suspended for Game 4, and the Oilers score in the last minute of regulation to tie up the series. The Canucks hit the Uno reverse card, however, the very next game when JT Miller would score with 30 seconds left to put the Canucks up 3-2 in the series.
Here is Lindholm looking to shoot at the post. JT Miller scores!
After having some goalie issues that saw Edmonton go to Picard in Games 4 and 5, the Oilers would give the crease back to Skinner, who stopped 15 shots in a blowout Oilers win. That meant a Game 7 to determine who will represent Canada for the rest of the playoffs. With the Oilers up 3-0, Vancouver scored twice to make things really interesting, but the Oilers held on and advanced to the Western Conference Final. With only 4 teams remaining, we would have an unbelievable goalie matchup in the East between Sergei Bobrovsky and Igor Shesterkin. However, it was Officer Bobrovsky who would steal the show in Game 1 and record his first shutout of the playoffs. The postseason is when unsung heroes step up and become a legend, and in Game 2, the unlikely candidate would step up to tie the series.
Gaudreau knocks it down. He gets it back.
With the Rangers riding the high and the breakout play of noted bust Alexis Lafreniere, the Rangers would get to experience some more magic in OT.
Face off. Gustafsson, they score!
It was looking like the Rangers could possibly pull this off and head back to the Cup Finals for the first time since 2014. But this Panthers team is just built different. For a Rangers team that thrived off the rush, Florida started to beat them at their own game. Combine that with their relentless forecheck, it wore down the Rangers' D. With the Rangers' top scorers also going radio silent, Igor Shesterkin could no longer mask the issues that plagued New York, and the Panthers won 3 straight to advance to the Cup Final for the second consecutive year. Out west, this matchup between the Oilers and Stars was over before it even started for a lot of fans. With how deep Dallas was and how they've methodically dismantled great teams in Vegas and Colorado, many people thought that they would easily expose the goaltending and defense of Edmonton. But early in Game 1, we saw a different Stuart Skinner for the Oilers.
Bogdanov was poaching at the line, stop, and rebound stop. Big early start.
With both goalies putting on a show through 5 periods of hockey, it would be the Oilers' savior who comes up clutch. Both teams would go back and forth with their own stars having defining moments to propel them to a win. But to everyone's surprise, the Oilers held a 3-2 series lead with a chance to move on to the finals on home ice. And one player who simply wouldn't be denied would be Connor McDavid.
To the outside, works his way. What a goal! Wow! 1-0 Edmonton.
The Edmonton Oilers make NHL history by becoming the first team to advance to the Cup Final with the fewest points in the first 12 games of the season. The matchup was set. One team looking to complete a Cinderella comeback from the basement of the league, and the other looking for redemption for what happened last season. Both teams have players who can single-handedly steal games, and early in this series, it was all Officer Bobrovsky. Even though the Oilers carried the pace of play, Bobrovsky was superhuman and completely shut down any hope for the Oilers. Florida won 3 straight, and it was looking like this series was over. The Panthers can start flying over family for celebrations, planning their own parade, because it's been 82 years since we've seen a team come back down 0-3 in the Cup Finals. But this season was made for the script, and all it takes is a seed of doubt to change the momentum.
Spears
With the Oilers chasing Bobrovsky out of the net in a blowout Game 4 win, they started to negate Florida's aggressiveness by spreading them out in the middle of the ice. The Oilers and McDavid had one objective come Game 5, and that was to drag them back to Alberta. It would take a monster effort from everyone, but one man in particular was ready to have a legacy game.
David swings wide, takes the shot, scores! A Stanley Cup final goal in the building he was drafted, going all the way, scores! What a brilliant piece of work!
Thanks to McDavid, the Oilers were heading back to Alberta for one last time. And that was a place where they simply wouldn't be denied. Despite McDavid threatening Gretzky's all-time scoring record in a single postseason, the Oilers just beat the Panthers to force Game 7 without McDavid recording a single point. This season has been absolute bananas, and it may end with one of the greatest comebacks we've ever seen, led by one of the most talented players in the history of the sport. But this is Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Anything that's happened is in the past, and all that matters is this one game. And a perfect microcosm of the Oilers' season and even this series, the Panthers jumped out to an early one-goal lead.
Rodriguez leads Florida with 4 scores, deflected in front, and Florida strikes first.
But the Oilers would respond back almost immediately.
Scores! Matthias Janmark!
With it being a 1-1 game in the second, the Panthers would get a rare odd-man rush that saw Sam Reinhart capitalize on a miscommunication within the Oilers' defense.
So they give up the line, and Reinhart, just one goal in his last 8, none bigger than this one in Game 7.
Down by 1 after making this enormous comeback, the Oilers pressed desperately to try and tie the game.
And up top, trying to sift it through, McDavid, Hyman, Bobrovsky down, and straight out.
But this Panthers team is built for these moments. And despite a colossal choke being at stake, they have the Oilers right where they want them. So with time ticking down on one of the most bizarre and entertaining seasons that we've seen in a very long time, it would be the Florida Panthers who would be the last ones standing.
The Panthers are Stanley Cup champions.
So that is the complete recap of the chaotic 2023-2024 NHL season. What did you think? What was the most memorable moment? What surprised you? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you want to see all of our in-depth strategy breakdowns from this past season, click on the playlist here and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss all of what's coming for next season.